How's it going, guys? It's Chucky here. Many of you may know that Minecraft is some of the richest and deepest history out of any other game out there, from stuff as simple as just the updates and Easter eggs in the vanilla game, to 10-year-old servers with huge communities, and what I personally see as the most interesting thing, the accounts. I've talked about plenty of this stuff on my channel before, but I don't think any topic I've covered has quite as much history and mystery behind it as this one does. There are a handful of accounts whose names consist of just a single letter, number, or other characters. These are called one-character accounts and are some of the rarest and most valuable in the game, and as I said, possibly the accounts with the most history behind them. From everything ranging from how they were created to what happened from that point on. And there's also a whole lot of mystery behind some of the accounts relating to how they were even made in the first place. And a good amount of this info hasn't even been talked about on YouTube before, so make sure to stick around for the whole video for all the info. And before I get into the video fully, I just want to give you all a massive thank you for the support on my last video. It got over 10,000 views in just a few days, and it also pushed me over 3,000 subscribers, which I just cannot thank you guys enough for. So if you do enjoy my videos, I just want to let you know that you can join my Discord server. We've got a super friendly community of almost 700 people there, so if you want to come chill with us, the link will be on screen and at the top of the description. And lastly, even though there's an incredible amount of you guys here already, over 75% of you guys aren't subscribed. So if you do want to help me out, it would mean a lot if you could press the button down below, but enough of that, please enjoy the video. So it's obviously not hard for me to explain what one character names are. As I said, they're just names that only have one letter, number, or other character in them. There's really not much else to it, right? Well, for the most part, yes. But if you start to look at exactly which characters existed, then you start to realize that there might be a little bit more to it all. Of course, at one point, every single one character possible existed. But this is all in the very alpha days of the game, and many of them haven't been made premium. If you don't know what that means, don't worry, I will go into that a bit later. I'll be going through all of the characters that do exist at the moment though in more detail throughout the video, but I'll quickly break down the ones that did actually exist recently. To start with, the letters G, F, R, U, sort of, X, Y, and Z have existed, along with the numbers 1 and 8, and finally the characters underscore and $sign. Since their creation, each one has had its own unique journey that brought it to wherever it is now. From being locked, name change, or just straight up deleted, there is so much information to go into with each of these. But first, I quickly want to go into how they were all made in the first place. If you've seen my video on 2-character IGNs, then this will likely all be familiar to you. As you'll likely know, the minimum length a name can be is 3 characters, or 4, apparently? That's okay. Obviously meaning that a name just shouldn't be allowed to be 1 or 2 letters long, but obviously that's not the case. Minecraft has been around for a very long time though, and in the last 11 years, things have changed a whole lot. If you don't know already, when Minecraft was in its very early days, you could, so to speak, reserve a name, meaning that you didn't actually need to buy an account to fill up the name slot. All this did is just create what's called a non-premium account. All you had to do was provide an email and the username you wanted, and you technically just had it reserved. This obviously meant that the slots for many OG accounts were filled up, but I talked about that in another video. What we're concerned about right now is how way back in the alpha days, some of these non-premium accounts turned out to be one-character usernames. But how does that help us? They're still taken and known by someone who doesn't play the game anymore. So how do people get their names from there? Well, in 2014, an exploit was discovered which allowed people to find out the email that any unmigrated or non-premium account was registered to. It was as simple as using a Firefox extension known as tamper data, which allowed you to view and modify requests being sent between the website and the client. Essentially, all you would do is go to the reset password page, supply the username, and request a password reset. You'd then see the email it was sent to in the tamper data client, because Mojang used an incredibly insecure way of doing password resets, because it's Mojang, what can you expect? This, however, did get fixed and turned out to be a mistake on Mojang's part, but it did end up leading to thousands of people losing their OG and semi-OG usernames. But even if you have the email address, that's only so far. You still need to access it and get the password. But that turned out to be really simple. People would re-register expired emails, exploit into existing accounts, or even social engineer email providers to gain access to the email account and get the password reset themselves. And in case you're wondering about how the social engineering worked, many email services have incredibly low security levels, so you'd be surprised with how much people could get away with. So it really was as simple as that. The method was tried on the 1 characters that existed back then, and they were just accessed. I must mention though that there were a few other methods, but this was the one used to create most of the community owned ones. I'll start going into the other methods later, but for now, let's talk about some of the accounts themselves, starting off with 2 of the most famous and well known out there. As I said, 8 and G are probably 2 of the most well known 1 characters out there. 8 being the more famous of the 2. This is because of a mixture of reasons. The first being that they are the only 2 1 characters that are still confirmed as community owned. They both have 3 or 4 Minecon capes on them, and because there's a multitude of videos made on them in the past, such as Xnostoria's video with over 2 million views on 8. But anyway, these accounts were likely created using the same method, so they were in the community right from the start. Over time, they were sold around a little, and the capes added to them. But oddly enough, while they are easily the most famous accounts out there, they have the least backstory behind them. For the most part, they're just entirely normal OG accounts. They obviously get huge reactions on servers, and they're easily some of the rarest accounts out there, surpassing even many cape accounts and most OGs. The most drama in history comes with the past owners. Obviously, these accounts are incredibly rare, meaning they sell for a massive amount. And if you're new to these videos, prepare yourself, because when I mean massive, I really mean massive. 8 on its own famously sold a little while ago for $8,000, but that owner didn't keep it forever. People soon realized that eventually, these accounts would eventually meet the same fate as many other god tier accounts such as Fox and Connaughton, and end up getting passed around the community faster than could even be tracked, and possibly even end up as scam accounts. So, someone eventually decided to put a stop to this, and in 2018, 8 and G were bought as a pair for $20,000. And by the way, I know I usually try not to talk about if an active account has been sold, but seeing this as a video with over 2 million views referencing it in the title and the account still isn't locked, I feel like I'm alright talking about it. But if it does happen to get locked after this video, then fuck me, I guess. But regardless, since it was sold, the owner has declined or just straight up ignored any offers for either of the accounts. Someone messaged the owner offering $40,000 and didn't even get a response. The owner is adamant that the accounts just will never be released back into the community, but going by the story of this next one, it seems as though we're lucky they even still exist. R is on quite the opposite end of the spectrum to 8 and G. While those are very well known, not many outside of the community know of this one's existence. The reasoning for this is very simple. The account just doesn't exist anymore. It can't be viewed on NameMC or anything of the sort. So why is this? Well, the account has a similar origin story to most community-owned one characters. It was made premium around 2014, but was soon sold to a guy named Stan MPL. Stan then put a 2013 cape on it and used it for a little bit, even recording a few videos and uploading them to YouTube of him just running around showing off his cape in true OG account owner fashion. Now, Stan was given the original email and transaction ID of the account upon buying it, as many accounts are. If you're unfamiliar with what these do, essentially if an account gets locked due to selling or something similar, you can email Mojang support with these two pieces of information and have a decent shot of getting the account unlocked. You can also use them to pull accounts back if they're stolen, hacked, or whatever, so they're pretty important to have, especially if you don't 100% trust the seller. So, after a little while, Stan began to feel like the seller wasn't being 100% truthful with him, specifically regarding the TID to the account. So, he emailed Mojang support and simply asked if the TID was the correct one for the account. Back then, Mojang wasn't as completely terrible as it is currently, so a random support officer replied pretty fast, simply saying that it just wasn't the right one. So, Stan went back to the seller and received a second TID. Being even more suspicious this time, he went back to support and again was told that it was false. You could imagine at this point, Mojang themselves might be starting to get a little suspicious. The owner of a one-character IGN suddenly messaging them twice in a row with 2 false transaction IDs? Not likely. But regardless of this, Stan went back to the seller expressing his frustration and letting them know that the TID was again fake and he would soon be opening a scam report. This time, he was given the correct TID to the account, but just to be safe, went back again to Mojang to ask for the final time if it was the right one. But instead of just any regular customer support agent responding, this time the one and only customer support administrator and content manager Mark did. And he didn't just lock the account for being sold like he would most of their accounts, he straight up deleted the account from the database, going way above and beyond the normal protocol for no obvious reason. So quite simply, that's just where the story ends for the account. Now F is probably the account with the most mystery behind it. Quite literally nobody knows the exact story behind it, it's almost all just rumours. If you look at the account on NameMC, you can see it lies unclaimed with just a single skin and Optifine cape on it, and it's been like that basically since its creation. It also lays completely inactive on Hypixel and Mineplex, leading most people to believe that the owner has disappeared or just gone inactive for some reason. This leads me on to my favourite and possibly the craziest yet most believed story about the account. But as always with rumours and theories, bear in mind that none of it is really confirmed. Regardless, we do know that the account was again likely created somebody with the 2014 method, but that's really all we know for certain. In the rumour that I want to tell, it's said to have been created by a Russian player also on a popular forum at the time, but he didn't really want to sell the account due to a couple reasons such as it being so rare. But rumour has it, he was later arrested for something completely unrelated to Minecraft and either hasn't gotten out of jail yet or just had other priorities than his rare Minecraft account. It's worth keeping in mind that this story has been around since before locking was even a thing in the community, all the way back before 2015, before even name change day happened, so it's easily one of the more classic stories behind any account. There are a few other theories, but none of them really have any concrete evidence behind them. It's at the point where this account is basically just 100% rumours. So if you think you know anything about it, keep in mind it's likely not completely correct. But from here, it gets really interesting. The 4 that I've covered so far have been the normal ones, so sit tight and get ready for some of the strangest accounts that I've ever talked about. I've talked to multiple people about these accounts and done a decent amount of research behind them myself, and even now I'm still just baffled by how these accounts are how they are. I'm grouping these two together as they are very similar accounts for multiple reasons. To start with, both of them sadly have been name changed from the one character. One is now fruity_cake, and underscore is space12345. Secondly, both of them have a 2012 Minecon cape on them, and last but most confusingly, they both used to have invalid UUIDs. They were way shorter than a regular UUID, and had letters that weren't supposed to be in them. If you look at a few accounts on NameMC, it's fairly obvious that UUIDs only use the letters A to F and the numbers 1 through 9. So when these accounts showed as having letters like Y in them, it was clear something was up. These accounts were first discovered around June of 2019, when a few people were running scripts to check for what are known as uncached capes, which are essentially just accounts with capes that nobody really knows about yet. And on the list that it returned when they were searching for them were these two accounts, one and underscore. Everyone was obviously super confused. For starters, the reason nobody knew about them before is when you searched them on NameMC, it just came up with an error 500, possibly related to the corrupted UUIDs. But it could have been any number of things, including how the names had been changed before they were even discovered. But what about the accounts themselves? Well, for a bit of context, Mojang has been known to tamper with names and accounts in the past. The names OOF and W0W are a good example of this. If you look at the times the names were changed on the various accounts, then you can see something is up with them, but I might go more into that in a future video. I had written a massive paragraph on all this, but I realised the video would just get super long if I read the whole thing out, so I'm going to put it as simply as I can. Taking a look on the website mcskinhistory.com, you can see that something is wrong with these accounts. There are two instances of these names on different accounts. The first being the one with the invalid UUID, and the second one being the one that exists now. Regardless of whether or not this is because there was two separate accounts, or just because the site shows separate UUIDs like that, if you try to click on the account at the bottom, it just brings up another error. But regardless of that, the obvious conclusion to come to is that these names are also Mojang owned. Why? Well, if we look at some of the invalids that were changed in the last purge, Mojang has a pattern of changing the name to something vaguely related to the username, just with a few numbers on the end. This would explain why underscore was changed to space 12345. And of course, I can't think of any other account that's ever been made with an invalid UUID. It seems as though Mojang was doing some testing similar to how they were with OOF and W0W, and were trying out one character names, invalid UUIDs, and apparently how Minecon capes work with these as well for whatever reason. It's super unlikely that someone found a massive exploit in the name system and used it solely to create two one character names and just leave it at that without telling anyone. And on top of that, somehow having the ability to get a couple 2012 capes on them as well. Let me know in the comments if you want me to go into some more detail on these accounts, as I feel like I could probably talk for a while on these, alongside OOF and WoW. These two probably have the easiest to explain histories. If you look on X's NameMC profile, well, yeah, it's owned by Mark, there's not much I can say about it. Mark has always expressed interest in the OG community, both in creating names himself, adding capes to his account simply for it to look cool, and by being the main employee that locks OG accounts for being sold. He might not have that title, but that's how it is. But Zed is a little bit harder to explain. Again, with Mark's obsession with OG accounts, he's also been known to change the capitalization of names to his preference, and then just delete the previous version of the name. He's done this with his main account, and as it turns out, he also did it with X. Sadly, I can't show you proof of this, as he straight up just deletes the name change from the database, so I suppose you'll just have to take my word for this one. Anyway, X's capitalization was changed on the 7th of February 2015, the same day as Zed's. Coincidence? I think not. That was fucking cringe. But regardless, this essentially just tells us that Zed is very likely also at least owned by another Mojang employee, if not Mark himself. But oddly enough, these two, along with one, underscore, and possibly a couple others I'll be talking about soon, are likely the only ones owned by Mojang. But there used to be rumors of another Mojang-owned one-character username, but these ended up turning out to be entirely false. I'm talking about possibly the most valuable username out there, $. I have covered $sign before in my oldest video on invalid accounts, but I didn't go into anywhere near as much detail as I can now. To start with, this is the longest lasting of the two invalid one characters. It's been around for a super long time, yet as of right now we're not 100% certain on how it was created. But sadly, in the invalid wipe that happened a few weeks ago, $sign was caught and changed to just changed1. But let's go back to everything we knew about $sign before it was deleted. The account had been known about for quite a long time, but nobody had any idea who owned it, where it came from, or if it was even still active. So, a rumor started that it was owned by Mojang. After all, how else would it have been created? Someone even interviewed Jeb about it and asked if it was owned by them, and he said yes. In late 2018, a huge trend of accessing accounts by brute forcing them started. Many accounts began being hacked, including invalids, and eventually, someone in the community had the idea of going for $sign. Most people obviously thought that it was just never gonna happen. Even if it wasn't owned by Mojang, it would have a very strong password, right? Well, this turned out not to be the case, as a little while later, it was accessed. And that strong password I mentioned earlier? Yeah, that didn't exist. The password protecting this account was simply just cha-ching in all lowercase. And when looking at the original email and IP of registration, it was clear that the account was not registered or created by a Mojang employee. I can't mention exactly where, but the IP could be tracked down to the USA, and there was a few other things that I sadly can't mention that proves that it wasn't. So with it not being a Mojang account, and turning out to be completely inactive, the account was brought onto a few servers and sold around a little, even at one point being sold for around $2,000 to the owner of 8ng. I'm going to keep these last two short, as the last 4 days of my life have been consumed entirely by writing all 8 pages of this godforsaken script. But moving away from that, Y is another name that's had a little bit of confusion around it. For a long time, this account had this girl skin on it, which has since been removed. It's been there literally since NameMC even started caching skins back in March 2016, and alongside that, the account was also shown as unmigrated for a very long time. Because of this, people were constantly trying to hack into the account by brute forcing it, but were met with little success. Soon after though, someone noticed that something very strange happened with the account. If you went to the Minecraft launcher and entered the username along with any password, it'd show the message account already migrated. The same thing also happened specifically with the account Diamond, which also used to show as unmigrated on NameMC. This is obviously really strange, but in late 2016, both Y and Diamond lost their unmigrated status around the same time, and the skin was just wiped from the account Y, which is why the skin defaults to an Alex skin when viewed on NameMC. But as you can probably predict, this again leads us to the fact that the account is likely owned by someone at Mojang again, as nobody in their right mind would migrate their one-letter account, remove the skin, and then just never touch it again. So currently there is a little bit of research going into which Mojang employee is the owner, so I may be bringing this up in a future video. And finally, to end this video off, I'm going to talk about the one that we really just don't know much about at all, you. I also mentioned this one in a few of my older videos, but a few years ago, around 2015, people started to realize that there was another invalid one letter by the name of the U with 2 dots over it. It seemed to be inactive with just a Steve skin on it and with the account migrated, but a few months later, around 2016, people realized that completely out of nowhere, the name was changed to just a regular U. The original name was wiped from everywhere, so it was clear this was one of Mojang's actions against invalids. But it's still unclear who owned it. Was it just an account created in an exploit, or was it owned by Mojang all along? I'm gonna leave this question up to you guys in the comment section. What do you think the history of this account is? Let me know and I'll reply to some of my favourite answers. But apart from that, if you did enjoy the video, please make sure to like and subscribe. This video took easily the longest time out of any of my videos to produce, and it's been in the making for over a month now. But I think I did manage to cover everything I wanted to, but if you do have any more questions, feel free to either DM me on Twitter at IGNChucky or leave a comment below. But I'm not going to keep you guys any longer, I'll see you in the next video.